Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. My wife kissed our CO with a room full of cameras on her, one hand still wrapped around her champagne glass, the other on his jaw like she wanted the whole city to know exactly who she belonged to. And the worst part? She did it while I was standing 10 feet away. People always imagine a moment like that comes with shouting, broken glass, security dragging someone out. But when it happened to me, the room just went quiet. Not silent, exactly. The music was still playing. Glasses were still clinking. Someone in the back still laughed because they hadn't seen it yet. But around me, I felt the silence spread. My wife pulled away from him slowly, smiling like she just won something. The CEO, Grant Holloway, didn't look embarrassed. He looked amused. Like I was a harmless inconvenience standing in the wrong place. Then Claire turned, saw me, and froze for half a second. Just half a second. After that, she lifted her chin and gave me the smallest shrug. That was when I knew two things. First, the affair was real. Second, she thought I was too weak to do anything about it. She was wrong. Because 20 minutes later, I walked upstairs to the executive boardroom, laid a leather folder on the polished table, and claimed the board seat they had spent months pretending I didn't have. And by midnight, Grant was no longer CO. Claire was no longer my wife. And every person in that building finally understood why I had stayed quiet for so long. I'm Daniel Mercer. I'm 38, and for most of my marriage I was the kind of man people overlooked on purpose. I wasn't flashy. I didn't need attention. I handled operations at Holloway Biotech, the company everyone in that room thought belonged entirely to Grant. I wore simple suits, drove a modest car, and left the spotlight to people who craved it. Claire used to say that was one of the things she loved about me. When we met, she was smart, magnetic, and impossible to ignore. She could walk into a room and rearrange the air in it. I was the opposite. I built things quietly. Systems, teams, processes. I liked things that worked. At first, we fit. She was in corporate communications when we met, ambitious but still warm. Back then, when we sat in our tiny apartment eating takeout at midnight, she used to rest her head on my shoulder and say, "One day we're going to have the kind of life people envy." I thought she meant a home. A family. I didn't realize she meant status. What most people at Holloway didn't know was that my connection to the company went deeper than my job title. Grant's father, Richard Holloway, founded the company with my mother. She was the financial architect behind it. He was the public face. When Richard died, and my mother retired after her stroke, certain ownership structures were put into a family trust to protect the company from exactly the kind of ego-driven leadership that destroys good businesses. One of those protections was a board seat. Not symbolic. Not honorary. A legally protected voting seat tied to Class A shares held through the Mercer Holloway Trust. I just never used it. At 29, I didn't want a war. My mother told me, if you can guide a machine quietly, do that before you grab the wheel in front of everyone. So I stayed in operations, watched, learned, and let Grant run the company. For a while, he did it well enough. Then success made him reckless. And success made Claire interested. It started with little things. Later nights. Extra perfume for internal strategy dinners. A sudden habit of locking her phone when she used to leave it face up on the counter. She started talking to me like I was an employee she had outgrown. "Daniel, you really need to stop dressing like middle management." "Daniel, perception matters." "Daniel, people with ambition don't disappear into the background on purpose." That one stuck with me. People with ambition. As if quiet meant empty. As if restraint meant weakness. Then there was Grant. He started calling Claire directly instead of going through her team. He insisted she join him at investor dinners. He praised her in meetings for ideas that were often built on work from other departments. Once, during a quarterly review, he put his hand on the small of her back while she laughed at something I hadn't even heard. When I looked at Claire afterward, expecting maybe embarrassment, maybe discomfort, all I saw was satisfaction. That was the first time my stomach dropped. Still, suspicion isn't proof. And I don't move on instinct when the stakes are high. I move on facts. So I started paying attention. I noticed purchase approvals routed around normal compliance review. I noticed a consulting vendor, Aurelia Strategy Group, billing us obscene amounts for brand repositioning and executive image alignment. That would have been annoying, but not unusual, except the invoices were approved directly through Grant's office. Then one night Claire left her laptop open in the den while she showered. I wasn't looking for romance. I was looking for numbers. And that's what I found first. An email chain between Claire and Grant about an upcoming acquisition announcement. Attached was a draft media strategy. Also attached, accidentally, was a spreadsheet of payments to Aurelius. The LLC behind Aurelius had one listed member, Claire Mercer, my wife. My chest went cold. Not just an affair. Not just humiliation. I kept reading. There were messages too, hidden in a side folder she probably thought no one would check because the subject lines were so bland. Dinner after the board prep? Tell him you're working late. He suspects nothing. And one from Claire that I still remember word for word. He's useful because he never makes noise. I sat there staring at the screen until the shower turned off upstairs. That was the moment something in me changed. Not rage. Not yet. Clarity. I copied everything. Emails. Invoices. Incorporation records. Payment trails. I sent them to an external attorney my mother trusted long before Grant was old enough to wear a suit. Then I waited. Over the next 3 weeks, I learned more than I wanted to know. They'd been sleeping together for at least 6 months. Claire had been feeding Grant internal information about department heads, board tensions, even my mother's health. In return, Grant had been using the shell company to funnel money to her under the excuse of executive branding work. There were also plans to push through a bylaw interpretation that would sunset inactive legacy seats. That was the part that almost made me laugh. They weren't just betraying me. They were preparing to erase me. My attorney, Ellen, moved fast. She pulled the trust documents, confirmed my standing, and contacted 2 independent board members privately. Then a forensic accountant reviewed the payments. What Claire and Grant thought was untouchable executive privilege looked very different under legal light. I didn't tell Claire anything. I kissed her goodbye in the mornings. I listened when she complained about dead weight in the company. I nodded when she said Grant was the only visionary left in the building. One night, while adjusting her earrings before an event, she looked at me through the mirror and said, "You know, Daniel, some people are meant to lead and some people are meant to support." I met her eyes and said, "That must be comforting for you to believe." She smiled like she thought she'd won that exchange. The event where everything exploded was our 15th anniversary gala. Not ours as a couple, the company's. Hundreds of guests. Investors. Media. Senior leadership. The kind of night where reputation is currency. I knew from Ellen that the board had been informally gathered upstairs for a late vote after the reception. Grant planned to lock in support for a restructuring package that would strengthen his control and weaken legacy voting protections. He didn't know I had already notified corporate counsel of my intent to exercise my seat. He didn't know the independent directors had the evidence. He didn't know security had been instructed to preserve footage from every executive floor camera that night. And Claire definitely didn't know any of that when she walked up to him near the stage, laughed at something he whispered, and kissed him like she wanted to stab me with it. People saw. Phones came up. Someone actually muttered, "Oh my God." Claire looked right at me after. Maybe she thought public humiliation would keep me obedient. Maybe she thought I'd storm out and make myself look pathetic. Maybe she just wanted to prove she'd crossed a line so bold there was no going back. She was right about one thing. There was no going back. I set my drink down, straightened my cuffs, and headed to the elevator. One of Grant's assistants tried to stop me outside the boardroom. "Mr. Holloway is in a closed session." I handed her the envelope from Ellen. Then he should read that before he keeps talking. When I walked in, Grant was at the head of the table mid-sentence. Claire wasn't there yet. She was probably downstairs enjoying the aftershock. Grant frowned. "Daniel, this meeting is for board members only." I took the empty chair halfway down the table and placed my folder in front of me. "Exactly." The room shifted. Corporate counsel cleared his throat and opened the envelope. For the record, Mr. Mercer has formally activated the Mercer-Holloway Trust seat effective immediately. Documentation has been verified. Grant actually laughed. That dormant seat hasn't been used in years. Ellen, on speakerphone, cut in before I had to answer. Dormant doesn't mean void, Mr. Holloway. And while we're speaking of invalid assumptions, you may want to review the materials Mr. Mercer has provided regarding undisclosed related party transactions. The folders were distributed. Grant's confidence cracked first at the invoices, then broke completely at the emails. One director, a woman named Patrice who had spent months being politely ignored by Grant, removed her glasses and said, "Is this real?" I answered her. Every page has already been preserved off-site. The door opened behind me. Claire walked in, still glowing from downstairs, until she saw the table. Then she saw the folders. Then she saw me sitting there. "Daniel," she said quietly, "what is this?" I turned to her for the first time that night and said, "Consequences." Grant tried to recover. "This is a personal matter being weaponized." "No," I said. "Your affair is a personal matter. Fraud is a corporate matter. Abuse of fiduciary duty is a corporate matter. Attempting to eliminate a protected board seat while secretly profiting with an executive you're sleeping with is definitely a corporate matter." Claire's face drained of color. "It wasn't like that." I looked at her. "You build the company through your shell firm while sharing an executive's bed and helping him consolidate control." She whispered, "You went through my computer?" I almost smiled. That's what she reached for. Not denial. Not remorse. Privacy. Grant slammed his hand on the table. "You think you can walk in here and take my company?" I leaned back and held his stare. "No, Grant. I think I can stop you from burning it down." The vote happened 15 minutes later. Temporary suspension of Grant's executive authority pending investigation. Unanimous except for his own vote, which didn't save him. Immediate internal review of all contracts connected to Aurelius. Claire placed on administrative leave and barred from company systems. Emergency appointment of interim executive oversight from the board. From me. Not CEO. I didn't want the title. But I took the seat. And I took control of what mattered. Downstairs, word spread faster than the catering staff could refill a glass. By the time Claire came to our penthouse after midnight, her mascara was smudged and her hands were shaking. She found me sitting in the dark living room. "Daniel," she said, voice cracking, "please tell me you didn't do all this because of one mistake." I laughed then. A small, tired sound. "One mistake? You lied to me for months. You stole from the company. You helped a man use you to manipulate governance. And you kissed him in front of me because you thought I'd just stand there." Tears filled her eyes. I was angry. I felt invisible. "You felt entitled," I said. She took a step toward me. "Can we fix this?" I stood and handed her a folder. "Divorce papers." She looked down, then back up. "You already filed?" "Yesterday." That was the first honest silence we'd had in a long time. The fallout lasted months. Grant resigned before the formal investigation finished, which didn't stop the civil action. His name was dragged through every financial journal that had once praised him. Claire tried to frame herself as manipulated, but the paper trail was too clean, too detailed, too ugly. She lost her job, her social circle, and eventually the apartment she thought she'd keep in the settlement. The prenup she once called unromantic protected exactly what it was designed to protect. More importantly, it protected what my mother and Richard built. As for the company, we survived. Better than survived, actually. Once the performance theater was stripped away, people could breathe again. Good employees stopped looking over their shoulders. Decisions got cleaner. Money stopped leaking. The board started acting like adults. And me? I moved into a smaller place with real sunlight and no ghosts in the walls. I started sleeping through the night again. My mother, when I told her everything, just squeezed my hand and said, "Quiet men are dangerous only when people mistake their silence for surrender." She was right. I didn't win because I was louder. I won because when the truth showed up, I was ready to stand beside it. Claire and Grant thought power belonged to the boldest person in the room, the one with the best smile, the sharpest suit, the least shame. They were wrong. Real power is patience. It's paperwork. It's timing. It's staying calm long enough to let arrogant people expose themselves. That kiss was supposed to humiliate me. Instead, it became the last thing they ever did before losing everything they thought they controlled. And if I learned anything from all of it, it's this. Some betrayals break you open. Others show you exactly who you've been all along. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.